You ever feel like the guest of honor at your own funeral? That's what my 33rd birthday felt like. I pulled into my parents' driveway a few minutes after 7, watching the fairy lights blink along the porch like they were trying too hard to be cheerful. Jessica, my younger sister, the eternal golden child, stood at the front door like she'd been waiting all night to star in a holiday commercial. Arms wide, teeth perfect, hair glowing under that soft yellow light. "Allie!" she beamed. I hate being called that. Still, I smiled and let her hug me, her perfume sticking to my jacket like a sticker I didn't ask for. "Happy birthday," she chirped, already pulling me inside before I could take a breath. The house looked just like it always had. Well, almost. New rug in the foyer, new painting above the fireplace, all subtle, tasteful, Jessica-approved changes. She'd been helping Mom redecorate lately, meaning, she pointed, Mom paid. Dinner smelled like roasted chicken, garlic, and something citrusy. Everything set just so. Napkins folded into tulips. My seat, at the far end of course, had a little card. Allison, birthday girl. Performative. That was the word. Everything felt a little too staged. My mother greeted me with the kind of smile that doesn't quite meet the eyes. She kissed my cheek, told me I looked tired but good, and handed me a glass of wine. I took it, but didn't sip. I hadn't had more than a sip in months, not since I started waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats, heart hammering, work stress, or maybe life stress. Either way, alcohol only made it worse. Dad was already seated at the table wearing the same navy cardigan he always did for occasions. He raised his glass when I walked in. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." "Thanks," I said and sat down. The table was quiet at first. Jessica filled it with small talk about a new job offer, some media startup with a kombucha bar and meditation pods, and Mom gushed about it like Jessica had just been asked to orbit the moon. Then came the toast. Dad cleared his throat, stood up, and lifted his wine glass. "To Allison," he began, "the oldest, the boldest, and definitely the busiest." A soft chuckle rippled through the table. My smile froze. "We're proud of you," he continued, "even if we don't always say it. And we know you've worked hard. Life in the city, the career, the—" He waved vaguely. "All of it." Jessica leaned toward me, eyes wide with faux adoration. "Seriously, Allie, you're like the most ambitious person I know." I nodded, fingers tightening around my glass. Dad set his drink down and reached for a plain white envelope. "That said, we wanted to share a bit of news tonight. A gift, you could say." He handed it to Jessica. I blinked. "I think you gave it to the wrong birthday girl." Jessica laughed and shook her head. "No, this one's for me." Then she opened it, pulled out a letter, read it silently. Her smile widened. Mom clapped her hands softly. "Tell her, Jess." Jessica looked at me like she'd just won an award. "They're giving me the house." The room tilted. I stared at her, then at Mom, then at Dad. "It's too much for us now," Dad said too quickly. "And you're always away, Allison. This house deserves to be lived in, filled with energy and, well, Jess has been helping us so much lately. It just made sense." Jessica was glowing, actually glowing. "They're transferring the deed next week," she said, grinning. "Can you believe it?" I swallowed. "No, I really can't." Laughter, clapping. Someone, I think Mom, said something about fresh beginnings. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene. I stood, walked to the end of the table and set down the gift I'd brought them. A framed photo of the house from when we were kids. I had it restored from an old Polaroid. I thought it would mean something. No one even noticed it sitting there. I walked out the door without saying goodbye, without finishing my wine, without looking back. But they had the camera running. Oh, yes. Jessica had her fancy little camcorder set up for the memories, angled perfectly from the bookshelf across the room, probably already editing footage in her mind for one of those sickeningly curated Instagram reels. And it caught everything. The moment I stood, the way I didn't cry, didn't scream, just froze, like a statue built for mourning, like someone witnessing her own erasure in real time. And that was how my birthday ended, with fairy lights blinking behind me, with the house I grew up in being handed over like a party favor, with silence. But inside that silence, something began to grow. Not rage, not quite. Something colder, sharper, a shape without a name, but it would have one soon enough. I didn't cry. Not when I got in the car. Not when the house vanished behind me in the rearview mirror. Not when I reached my apartment and saw the little bouquet of sunflowers I'd bought myself sitting on the counter like a pity gift. I didn't cry. Instead, I turned off my phone, kicked off my boots, and walked straight to the hallway closet. That one. The one with the water heater humming behind a crooked sliding door. The top shelf stacked with boxes I hadn't touched in years. I reached for the back, fingers brushing dust and cardboard until I felt it. The old archive box. Labeled in black marker. Dad. Hale Holdings. Projects, 1991-2009. The box was from the year he tried to show me what business really looks like. I was 13. Thought I was clever. Thought learning from the inside meant something. He'd given me a summer internship at Hale Holdings, which mostly meant fetching coffee and alphabetizing contracts I wasn't supposed to read. I read every single one, and I remembered how casually they'd all talked back then. The execs, the board members, the advisors, everyone drunk on their own self-importance, the men in pleated khakis tossing around phrases like friendly LLC and tax-neutral leverage like they were talking about vacation plans. At the time, I hadn't understood everything I saw, but I'd remembered. Now, as I opened that box, the scent of old toner and stale paper ink drifted out like a ghost. There were folders, company letterheads, memos printed on dot matrix printers, yellowing faxes with faint handwriting in the margins, and one flash drive, jet black, small as a cigarette butt, taped to the inside of a folder labeled Board Discretion Pending Review. Scrawled in Dad's handwriting, the one I knew like my own. Below it, a post-it. Confidential. I peeled it off and stared at it under the kitchen light. Board confidential. I grabbed my laptop, plugged it in, and waited. The folder tree opened immediately. No password protection, no encryption, nothing. Just a straight path into 2 decades of secrets. I expected balance sheets. What I didn't expect were folders labeled things like nominee agents, Cayman, Redwater Shell filings, IRS redactions, 2004, Jessica, 3 entities setup, 2009. I clicked. Jessica's name was on 3 shell companies I'd never heard of: Crownlight Consulting, Terrapin Maritime, and Northbridge Ventures. All registered through proxies, all established with vague, meaningless purposes: logistics support, business services, consulting. I could almost hear Dad's voice explaining it over scotch. Just protective structure, honey. All companies do it. There were scanned signatures. Jessica's name, in cursive loops she hadn't used since high school. Identical on all 3 filings. I'd bet money she'd never even seen these. And then came the audits. Some real, some doctored. Spreadsheets with internal comments still visible, like, clean this up for board packet, and swap column E with year over year to hide the dip. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Not with tears, with realization. They weren't just playing games with money. They were building towers on quicksand, paper empires, inflated, obscured, and laundered under a dozen fake names. My father, my mother, and Jessica? No, Jessica had been used. Her name was the ribbon on the gift box, the cover story. She'd always been the golden child because she was easy to write into the narrative. Pretty, polished, trusting. I leaned back in my chair. Did I feel bad for her? Maybe a little, but mostly I felt something new, clear, focused. I backed up the files immediately, first to an encrypted drive, then to a hidden cloud folder under an alias I'd created years ago when I was freelancing compliance work. Hale. Short for Incognito Hale. A dumb joke at the time, a nod to spy novels and ironic usernames. Now it had a new purpose. I tucked the flash drive into a box of sewing supplies no one but me ever opened, locked the cabinet, hid the key. Then I opened my laptop again and started searching. IRS whistleblower submission protocols, SEC anonymous tip lines, Bloomberg journalist contacts, how to trace offshore shell structures. No rage, no outbursts, just research, planning. I didn't even turn on the lights in the living room, just sat at the dining table in that blue glow, letting it wash over me like cold moonlight. It was almost midnight when I stopped. I looked up and realized the birthday card from Jessica was still in my purse. I pulled it out. Happy birthday, Allie. You've always been the strong one. Don't work too hard tonight. Love you always. I read it twice. Then a third time. Strong. That was the word people always gave me. Not kind. Not loyal. Not brilliant. Just strong. Like that was some badge of honor. I folded the card neatly and slipped it into the trash. Then I made a list of 3 names. Michael Tanner, former compliance officer at Hale Holdings, fired in 2014 after raising red flags about accounting irregularities. Last I heard, he was doing private consulting work. Still owed me a favor. Isabel Corin, investigative journalist, Bloomberg, known for torching corrupt CEOs and building airtight narratives out of scattered data. Anonymous IRS fraud, tip line, sterile, thankless, terrifyingly effective when aimed correctly. I wouldn't call the police. I wouldn't confront anyone. This wasn't about throwing a match. It was about opening a window and letting the storm in. I closed my laptop. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, everything was still. But the fuse had already been lit. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the dim light of my living room, legs folded on the couch, laptop humming softly on my knees. Outside, the city lights blinked like indifferent stars. Inside, I was building a war room in silence. This wasn't going to be a tantrum. I wasn't going to kick down doors or scream through boardrooms. This needed to be clinical, quiet, precise. At 3:42 a.m., I typed out a single line into a private chat window. "You still owe me a favor, Michael." He responded within 15 minutes. I wasn't surprised. Men like Michael Tanner didn't sleep well, not after what my father did to him. He had been the only one inside Hale Holdings who raised concerns back in 2014. Brought up discrepancies in offshore contracts, invoices that didn't match services rendered, payments routed through 3 layers of proxy corporations. He lasted 3 weeks after that. They buried him in non-disclosure threats and smeared him as unstable in internal HR logs. But I remembered. I remembered the way he looked at me when we passed in the hallway that day, like a man drowning slowly, hand barely above water. Now he replied, "If you have what I think you have, I'm in." We spent 2 hours on an encrypted call. I showed him the files. He showed me patterns I hadn't even noticed. Repeated invoice structures across entities, consulting expenses, logged against non-existent companies, Jessica's name attached to transactions that conveniently fell just below reporting thresholds. "This is enough to raise red flags everywhere," Michael said. "But if you want to burn them, we need to build a paper trail. Connect the shell core, trace the money, catch the deviations. We started that night. Every file from the flash drive was duplicated, sorted, and organized across 5 new folders. Tax, discrepancies in filings, dates that didn't align, inflated losses. Shells, the network of dummy corporations, complete with founding docs. Jessica, the 3 LLCs linked to her name, including timelines, transfers, audits, forged reports, internal memos suggesting number massaging. Offshore, routing documents, payment trails through the Caymans, Isle of Man, Belize. Michael created a spreadsheet, a beast of a thing, with color-coded flags and breadcrumb links. Blue for verified documents, yellow for suspect transfers, red for high-risk fraud indicators. I named the file, Collapse HH Master. By dawn, I had a roadmap. What followed was a week of silence so thick it hummed. No phone calls to Jessica. No, why the hell did you emails to my parents? Instead, I became someone else entirely. My real email went cold. I created a new identity. I Hail. Genderless, placeless, faceless. The name carried enough ambiguity to confuse, and enough cleverness to feel satisfying. All communications, all uploads, all trace routes were rerouted through VPN chains and encrypted drop servers. I built a digital ghost. Michael handled the technicals. I handled the tone. We drafted whistleblower reports with careful language, never accusing, always suggesting further review. We included just enough to spark curiosity, never the full fire. Let them dig. Because when they dig, they own the discovery. They chase it. They make it public. We set a deadline, March 15th, a symbolic day, the Ides. On that morning, 3 packages were sent, a secure digital report to the IRS whistleblower office, complete with attachments and a full breakdown of suspected offshore tax evasion structures. A similar tip to the SEC Enforcement Division, flagging potential investor fraud, undisclosed interests, and falsified audit trails. A final package to Isabel Corin, a Bloomberg journalist who'd built her career on torching white-collar corruption. I sent it under the alias I Hail, with the subject line, "They buried this. I dug it up." No press release, no dramatic confrontation, just whispers, just paper, just strategy. 2 days later, I walked past my office mirror and didn't recognize myself. I looked calmer. Paler, maybe. But still. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was ready. People assume revenge is loud, but the truth? The best revenge is whispered. And timed. They called it a peace dinner. That's what the text said anyway. Mom. We'd love to have a dinner, just us. It's been a strange few weeks. Let's reconnect. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Me. Sure. What time? No emojis, no heart. Just the knife. The thing is, you can always tell when guilt tries to masquerade as grace. There's a tremble to it, like someone saying sorry with their hands behind their back, hiding the dagger still slick with your blood. So I got dressed in silence. Black dress, minimal jewelry, no makeup beyond lipstick the shade of dried wine, just enough to make them second-guess what I'd come for. Dinner was set for 7:30. I arrived at 7:28. Jessica opened the door like a hostess welcoming guests to a gallery. "Allie," she said brightly, "you look elegant." I returned the smile, paper thin. "And you look exactly how you want to be seen." The dining room was lit with too many candles. Mom had polished the silverware, and Dad poured wine like a man trying not to spill. The table had 4 place settings, though they knew I wouldn't stay long. There was chicken again. Roasted with rosemary, because Mom still remembered I liked it as a kid. Everything smelled like effort. But effort isn't the same as love. They made it 10 minutes before the conversation turned. "You know," Mom began, her voice coiled and pleasant, "about the house. We just felt it was easier that way. Jess is here more often. She understands the neighborhood. I sipped my water. Of course. Of course, Dad echoed, blinking. So you're not upset? Upset? I tilted my head, like I hadn't heard of the word before. Oh no, I completely understand. In some families, love is just worth more per square foot. Jessica laughed awkwardly. Allie, come on, don't be like that. I'm not being anything. I'm just recalibrating expectations. They all shifted. A shared glance passed across the table like a draft. We still love you equally. Mom tried again, folding her napkin like she was preparing it for a clean lie. It's just, well, the timing worked. Jess and Ryan are thinking of starting a family, and the house is perfect. Dad nodded quickly. And you're so busy in the city. We didn't think you'd even notice. Right, I said. Because people only miss homes they sleep in, not the ones that built them. I looked at my plate. I hadn't touched the food. Neither had they. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Honestly, Allie, it's not a big deal. The house is just a house. You've always had your own life. This was about what made sense for everyone. Everyone. I smiled at that. I suppose you're right. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded linen napkin, just like the ones on the table. I'd swiped it from the restaurant where Jess had once bragged about getting VIP service, folded it carefully, wrote on it last night in ink that didn't smear. I placed it on the table, right in front of Dad's wine glass. He stared at it for a beat, then picked it up. His hands shook just slightly as he unfolded it, written in clean block letters, Board Files, 2703, just that. No explanation, no signature. Jessica's eyes darted to his. What is that? He didn't answer. His mouth opened, then closed. His shoulders fell back slightly like he was trying to recall which mask to wear. I stood, adjusted my coat, smoothed the fabric. Well, I said, glancing around the candlelit table. This was lovely. Jessica stood too, but didn't move toward me. What did you mean by that note? I looked at her, steady. You'll figure it out soon. Then I walked toward the door. No hugs, no thanks. As I opened it, Dad called after me, voice stretched thin. Allison, what did you do? I paused in the doorway, turned just enough to be heard, not enough to be seen. I opened a window. If there's a storm, it's not my fault the house was built on paper. Then I left. Behind me, the door clicked shut. The candles still burned. The chicken went cold. And the silence at that table finally meant something. The first sign of fallout came on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through a meeting when my phone started vibrating like a live wire on the desk. Unknown number. Then another. Then Jessica. I silenced it and kept typing, pretending not to notice the way my pulse began to sync with the buzz. By the time I finally checked the screen, there were 9 missed calls and 1 voicemail that began with a sob. Allie, please. Please pick up. Something's wrong. Dad says someone's out to ruin us. There's an article. Oh God, it's everywhere. Just call me, okay? I didn't. Instead, I opened my browser. Bloomberg. Hale Holdings under federal scrutiny for decades of financial misconduct. The headline sat there like a crown of thorns. Underneath, Isabel Corin's byline. She hadn't wasted time. The piece was surgical, dense, documented, merciless. Names, shell companies, fake audits. Words like embezzlement, tax evasion, falsified corporate reports. And there it was in the 4th paragraph. Several subsidiaries registered under the name Jessica Hale appear to have been used as pass-through entities for unreported foreign transfers. A picture of Jessica followed, her corporate headshot, all perfect lighting and teeth. She looked every bit the golden child, the clean face of something rotten underneath. I sat very still, The coffee on my desk had gone cold. My reflection in the darkened screen looked foreign, calm, almost serene. My phone rang again. Jessica. This time I answered. Her voice came through in shards. Dad's losing it. He said someone hacked us. He's called the lawyers, the board, everyone. They think it's internal sabotage. I leaned back in my chair. Is that so? They're saying I'm part of it, she choked. My name's all over the documents. Allie, I didn't even know about those companies. What do I do? Her panic was genuine. I could hear the tremor beneath the tears, the desperate belief that I could still fix things, like I used to fix her broken phone or her botched resumes. I kept my voice soft. You breathe, and you listen carefully. Oh, okay. This isn't about you, Jess. It never was. They used you because you were easy to trust. Pretty. Polished. Harmless. There was a long pause. What does that mean? It means you were a puppet. They built an empire and used your strings to make it dance. Her sob caught on the line. Dad says I need to hold a press statement. Should I? Don't. But he said, Jessica. I cut in, quiet but sharp. Do not let them put you in front of a camera. Not until you understand what's happening. They'll feed you lines, and when it burns, they'll watch you turn to ash and call it an accident. She didn't answer, only breathing, small, broken. You said you wanted to be part of the family business, I said finally. Congratulations, you're in it now. I hung up. By noon, the story had bled everywhere. Reuters, The Times, CNBC. Hale Holdings scandal unfolds as federal investigators step in. Words like fraud, misconduct, whistleblower began crawling across every feed. Inside an hour, their stock dropped 38%. Investors pulled millions. Photos of my father exiting the company's downtown office flooded the internet. Jaw tight, eyes wild, surrounded by flashes. The man who'd always measured life in margins and returns suddenly looked like someone who'd lost everything he couldn't buy back. By sunset, the pastel world my mother loved so much, their perfect house, the curated brunches, the matching linen tablecloths, had turned into a crime scene of whispers. Reporters lined the street, cameras perched at the gates. Neighbors who once waved now stared from behind curtains. Michael texted me a single word: landed. That was his code for confirmation. The files had connected, the agencies had taken the bait, and the press had built the narrative exactly as we designed. I poured myself a glass of water. Not wine, never wine, and stood by the window watching the city hum beneath me. The world outside didn't know my name was written behind that story, hidden in plain sight under I Hale. They just knew the Hales were burning. Later that night, Jessica called again. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was smaller this time, worn out from crying. Everything's falling apart. Dad's furious. Mom won't stop pacing. Reporters won't leave. They froze the company accounts. I don't even know what to do. Please call me Allie, please. I sat in the dark, listening to it once. Then I deleted it. On my laptop, another notification blinked. An email from Isabel Corin. Subject: Follow up on Hale Holdings. Thank you for your courage, she wrote. I know you didn't do this for credit, but when the dust settles, the truth will need a voice. Reach out when you're ready to tell yours. I closed the laptop. No, not yet. The truth doesn't need a voice when the echoes are still loud. It just needs silence and time to do its work. And as the night deepened, I realized something strange. I wasn't satisfied yet. Watching them crumble was exquisite, yes, but incomplete. Because Jessica would survive. She always did. She'd play the victim, wipe her tears, post something poetic about betrayal and resilience. She'd be forgiven before the month was out. No, the house might have cracked, but the foundation still held. That's when I knew the storm wasn't over. It was only just beginning. They say collapse happens slowly, then all at once. That's not true. It happens in stages. You just have to know where to look. First comes the silence. The kind of silence that settles over boardrooms like a plague. No one knows who's safe. Emails stop being casual. Phones ring longer before being answered. Everyone starts their sentences with, allegedly. Then come the departures. The CFO resigns to spend more time with family. The legal chief takes an unexpected sabbatical. The board chairman conveniently retires early. They spin it with PR gloss, but inside, everyone knows the ship has holes and the lifeboats are already full. Dad tried to stay above it. He appeared in a navy suit on CNBC, chin lifted like he was bored by the whole thing. This is clearly a coordinated smear campaign. We're cooperating fully. The truth will prevail. His voice trembled when he said truth. That same day, their largest investor pulled $23 million in funding. Jessica's lawyer called me. Not to threaten. No, we were past that, but to beg. She's confused. She didn't know. She's not liable for any financial misconduct if she wasn't in a decision-making role. I hung up halfway through his sentence. Let the vultures explain things to each other. I wasn't done yet. Michael and I met again, this time in person. A diner in New Jersey, 4 out of p.m., surrounded by linoleum and the clink of cheap silverware. He looked tired, older than I remembered. His hand still shook slightly when he reached for his coffee. You ready for the last nail? He asked. I slid over a manila envelope. Inside, a forged internal memo linking Hale Holdings to a payment funnel through a consulting firm in Cyprus, a company used as a pass-through to obscure payments tied to an international construction bid. The kicker? The payment document was digitally signed by one of Dad's oldest board allies, the same guy who gave Jessica that internship in college, the same one who retired early last week. This one's a kill shot, Michael said, voice low. International finance fraud is federal prison territory. I sipped my tea. It'll land before Friday. And it did. By Thursday morning, the New York Times ran with the headline, Offshore Empire, Hale Holdings allegedly laundered funds through international shell companies. Federal agents showed up at the company's main office by noon. Computers were boxed, documents hauled, no knock warrant. Dad didn't make a statement this time. The Hale family home, the one I wasn't welcome in, suddenly had news vans parked outside. I watched the footage from my apartment, legs tucked under me, tea cooling in my hands. Jessica appeared briefly in the doorway. Her hair was a mess. She looked shell-shocked, like someone had told her her face was being auctioned off, and she'd just realized she wasn't invited to the bidding. Please respect our privacy, she said, voice cracking. No one did. Twitter exploded. Reddit had threads titled Jessica Hale Knew and Golden Child or Ghost Accountant. Memes of her face photoshopped onto Monopoly money went viral. Mom deactivated her Facebook. A shame, really. She used to post pictures of brunch and call it legacy. By Friday, every Hale Holdings bank account was frozen. The SEC subpoenaed 5 board members. A grand jury was being discussed. And through it all, I kept feeding the fire. Slow, careful releases, internal messages, meeting notes, emails that started with burn after reading and ended up stapled to public filings. I didn't want to scorch the earth. Just make sure nothing could grow back. On Sunday, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Dad, you made your point. Come home. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Come home. The audacity of those 2 words. As if home was a thing he could summon back with a text. As if I hadn't already watched them give it away with a champagne toast and clapping hands. I typed back 1 word. No. Then deleted it. Then typed again. You gave Jess the house. Talk to her. This time I hit send. I imagined him reading it in that big leather chair in the study, the one he bought after his first bonus check. I imagined his face tightening, his lips pressed thin, trying to convince himself this wasn't happening. But it was, and we were far from the end. Jessica called again the next night. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. Her voice was quieter now. No tears. Just flat. "We're selling the house," she said. "Are you?" "There's no money. Dad said it's the only way to survive this." I sipped my tea. "Selling my house? That's generous of you." She didn't laugh. "What did you do?" "I opened a window." "Allie, please. There has to be something we can fix. We're sisters." I let that word sit in the air for a moment. Sisters. As if blood made betrayal less bitter. As if shared DNA diluted decades of being erased. "Do you remember the backsplash in the kitchen?" I asked. "What?" "The subway tile, white marble. I paid for it. A birthday gift. You said it made the space look cleaner." Jessica didn't respond. "Funny," I continued, "how clean things look just before they fall apart." I ended the call. By the end of the week, the house would be listed at a must-sell price. What Jessica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the buyer had already been found. An anonymous LLC. Cash purchase, owned, of course, by I Hale. Let them pack their bags. I was already designing the floor plan. The listing went live at 8 a.m. on a Friday. By 8:17, the house had its first offer. By noon, 3 more. But only one had no contingencies. Cash. Anonymous buyer. No inspections. Close within 5 days. That one was mine. Technically, it belonged to Mayfair Elm LLC, incorporated out of Delaware. Clean papers. No ties. Nothing to trace it back to I Hale, let alone Allison Hale, the busy daughter who didn't use the house enough. The moment the sale closed, I stood outside the gates like a guest arriving late to a party no one wanted to admit had ended. Jessica opened the door herself. Her face had changed. Less polished, more raw. Hair pulled back with no care. Dark circles blooming beneath her eyes like bruises that never got touched. She blinked when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on the kitchen," I said, stepping past her before she could stop me. You know how attached I am to the backsplash. The house was in shambles. Boxes lined the hallway. The dining room chairs were wrapped in plastic. One of the sconces had been removed from the upstairs landing, an obvious attempt to sneak out with one of Mom's favorite antiques. "You can't just walk in," Jessica snapped behind me, trying to sound firm. I turned. "Actually, I can." She stared at me, then blinked. "What? You didn't read the closing documents?" She went pale. I took the folder from my bag and laid it on the kitchen island, right where we used to leave cookies for Santa. "This is the deed transfer. The house was sold to Mayfair Elm. That's my company." She took one slow step forward. "You bought it?" "Technically," I said. "Mayfair Elm bought it. But I own Mayfair Elm." I watched it land, the math tumbling through her head, the mistake blooming behind her eyes like ink in water. Her voice, when it finally came, was small. "Why?" "Because this house was never yours to give away. It was never yours to sell. And now?" I smiled, sharp. "It's mine again." Jessica sank into a bar stool, her hands in her lap like a child waiting to be scolded. "We needed the money," she whispered. "No," I corrected. "You needed an out. There's a difference." She looked at the backsplash, the same one she used to brag about when hosting. "I didn't know, Allie. About the companies. About Dad. I didn't know what any of it meant." "I believe you," I said. "You weren't the architect, just the ribbon on the blueprint." She flinched. "What happens now?" she asked. I crossed the room slowly, taking in the house like it was an old photograph I'd just found in a drawer. I'm turning it into a foundation. Jessica blinked. A what? A nonprofit. For women caught in corporate fraud schemes. For the ones who didn't get the inheritance. The house. The toast. But, she began, this is our house. No, I said softly. It was never yours. I walked to the fireplace and ran my fingers along the mantel. The dust. The cracks. The silence. This house taught me something, I said. That love, when laced with leverage, isn't love. It's debt. She didn't speak. They used you, just like they used me. But the difference is, I stopped letting them. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. No. You asked for applause, and when you didn't get it, you took the spotlight anyway. I turned and faced her fully. I'm offering you a job. She blinked. What? At the foundation. Front desk. Minimum wage. No title. No corner office. Just paperwork and empathy. See what it feels like to hold space for someone else. Her mouth opened, then closed. Is this a joke? It's mercy, I said. A rare thing in this family. Jessica stared at the folder on the counter. Her hands trembled when she reached for it. You knew everything would collapse, she said. Didn't you? I met her eyes. I didn't make it collapse. I just opened a window and let the wind in. She stood slowly, shoulders hunched like someone walking through rain without a coat. I'll think about the job, she said. Take your time, I replied. Just don't take anything from the house. As I walked her to the door, I noticed the framed photo still hanging by the staircase. The four of us. One Thanksgiving years ago. Everyone smiling like liars. Jessica looked at it too. Do you ever miss it? She asked. No, I said. I miss what I thought it was. She nodded. Then she stepped out into the cold, where the family she once knew no longer existed. And I locked the door behind her. The first time I saw my father cry, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was on a press stage. That Thursday morning, Hale Holdings scheduled a last-minute press conference to clarify the misinformation surrounding recent allegations. The event was held in the company's once pristine atrium. Marble floors, glass balconies, and chandeliers now dull with scrutiny. I watched it unfold live from my laptop, sitting on a reclaimed couch in the living room of my house. Windows open, wind whispering through the new curtains. Dad stepped up to the podium with that practiced gravitas he always reserved for shareholder meetings and family lectures. A navy suit, a Hale blue tie, hair combed, rings gone. He looked like a man already halfway to surrender. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice measured, the past few weeks have been filled with accusations, many unfounded. We are victims of a malicious campaign to discredit our legacy. Legacy. That word again. Always his favorite. But his hands gave him away. They trembled slightly as he held the papers, the way they used to tremble when Mom brought up taxes or when the board challenged his numbers. I muted the live stream and pulled up another tab. The leaked video. It was scheduled to go live on 4 platforms at once: YouTube, Vimeo, Reddit, and a private journalist Dropbox. Precisely 10:17 a.m., the footage was grainy, recorded on a hidden camera from the corner of a vendor's office. A meeting 2 years ago. My father leaning back in a chair, drink in hand, his voice loose with smugness. Across from him, a contractor, half laughing, half nervous. And if the licensing fee comes in too high, Dad said, sipping his whiskey, well, we adjust the reports. They don't care how the sausage gets made, long as it smells like steak. Laughter. Then, bribes aren't bribes when you call them consulting fees. We've been doing it for 20 years. The vendor chuckled, then coughed, visibly uncomfortable. Dad kept smiling. I let the video run in the background as I unmuted the live stream, just in time to see my father pause mid-sentence. His phone, still in his jacket, buzzed once, then again. He glanced to the side. An assistant ran over, whispering something urgent into his ear. His eyes widened, his mouth twitched, and then he stepped back from the podium. Just half a step, but enough to tell the room something had shifted. "Excuse me," he said into the mic. But it was too late. The video was already up, viral within minutes, shared across investor forums, financial newsletters, Twitter threads. On screen, reporters began to murmur. Questions shouted. "Mr. Hale, can you confirm the video's authenticity? Are the bribes real? Was your daughter aware of these shell corporations?" He didn't answer. The live stream cut to chaos, a PR rep trying to regain control, microphones being unplugged, the wall of cameras still flashing. The fall was no longer quiet, it was televised. Within hours, the SEC confirmed the video's authenticity. The FBI released a statement. Shareholders filed a motion for emergency asset freeze. By that evening, every major news outlet was running segments not just on Hale Holdings' collapse, but on the personal fallout. Mom's charity board suspended her position indefinitely. Jessica deleted her Instagram. And Dad? He was let out of Hale Holdings headquarters in handcuffs at exactly 8:43 p.m., wearing the same navy suit. The footage showed him stone-faced, flanked by two agents, a storm of camera flashes turning his walk into a funeral procession. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He looked like a man who'd finally read the fine print on his own fate. Back at the house, I sat in the kitchen, the backsplash catching the light just so, and watched it all unfold on a muted screen. Jessica had sent one final message. "Is this what you wanted?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had already said everything that mattered with actions. The silence she felt now, that was the echo of everything I'd endured for years. No apology, no explanation, just performance and exclusion wrapped in family smiles. Now she knew how it felt. At midnight, I stepped outside. The air was cool, the street quiet. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a stranger on my own sidewalk. This wasn't revenge. It was release. And the house? The one they said I didn't use enough? It was mine now. Not just the walls, but the narrative. And as the world watched my father unravel, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The house was quiet when I returned. Not empty, but hushed. Like it remembered who I used to be and wasn't sure how to greet the version of me that had come back. There's a peculiar ache that comes from walking through a space where your childhood still lingers in the corners, where the floorboards remember the weight of your smaller feet, where ghosts aren't dead, they're just versions of yourself. Paused mid-sentence. I didn't turn on any lights. Just let the late afternoon sun bleed through the sheer curtains, casting everything in that honey-drenched glow that makes even dust look holy. The walls hadn't changed. Still pale ivory. Still with faint scuff marks from when Jessica used to rollerblade through the hallway and I got blamed for not watching her. I wandered from room to room like I was moving through a photo album. The living room still had indentations in the carpet from the old couch. The upstairs bathroom still had the chipped tile I tried to cover with nail polish in 11th grade. They hadn't scrubbed my presence out entirely, just painted over it. I reached the bedroom that used to be mine. They had turned it into some kind of guest room, neutrals, hotel-safe decor, not a single trace of who had once lived there. But I knew. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The creak still came from the bottom hinge. The window still rattled in the wind. I opened the closet and found a single cardboard box tucked in the corner, labeled in thick Sharpie. Allison. Old stuff. Old stuff. I carried it to the bed, sat cross-legged and opened it slowly. Inside, fragments. a cracked snow globe from a family trip to Aspen, a friendship bracelet from someone I couldn't even remember, a birthday card, this one from my 12th, written in Jessica's bubbly handwriting. To the best big sister in the world, you're my hero. I held it for a moment, longer than I meant to, then set it aside. At the bottom of the box was one more card, one I remembered well, from my parents, my 18th birthday. To our shining star, keep reaching, but don't forget where you come from. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at it until the ink blurred. Then I stood. Downstairs, the fireplace was exactly as I remembered, a little shallower than modern builds. Ash still clinging to the corners from someone's last failed fire. I struck a match, held the card over the flame until the edges curled in like they were afraid. Then I dropped it. It caught quickly. Orange. Hungry. The fire ate the words first. To our shining star. And then the name. And then the past. I fed it the friendship bracelet next. The snow globe. A few old photographs. One by one, I let the ghosts go. Not out of anger, but because they no longer belonged here. When the flame died down, only gray remains lingered. I whispered to no one, no stars here anymore, because the light they gave me had always come with strings, and I was done being tethered to borrowed brightness. I stood in the middle of the house, listening. It was different now. Still, honest. There were no voices telling me I should be grateful. No cameras catching my expressions for memory's sake. No applause. Just a house. Just me. I walked to the kitchen, brewed a cup of tea, and stood at the window as dusk swallowed the street. The same street where I used to ride my bike. The same one I once ran down barefoot, crying because Jessica got ice cream and I didn't. The same one I'd driven away from, clutching betrayal like it was a gift wrap. Now, it was mine again. On my terms. Not a shrine. Not a battlefield. Just a place to rebuild. Tomorrow, the foundation's first contractor would arrive. We'd start redesigning the lower level. Office space, intake rooms, a small archive of financial abuse cases, real ones, not just numbers on screens. Stories, faces, warnings. The kitchen would stay the same. I liked the backsplash. And the guest room? That would become a quiet room. A space for women to sit, to breathe, to reclaim. I sipped my tea. The wind howled a little outside. A storm coming. I didn't flinch. I welcomed it. Because this time I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was the one opening the door. 3 months later, the house was no longer a house. It was something else now. Something earned. We hung the sign in the front garden that morning. The Reclaim Foundation. Letters carved into brushed steel, mounted on warm cedar. Subtle. Steady. No marble plaques or gilded edges. Just strength in simplicity. The first day we opened, it rained. Not a downpour. Just soft. Persistent. The kind that makes you wear a hood even though it won't soak through. The kind that doesn't clean so much as remind you what's left behind. I stood by the front window as the first visitor stepped in. A woman in her 50s. Nervous smile. Tight hands. She looked at the hallway like it might judge her. We welcomed her with tea. Listened to her story. Didn't ask for proof. That's the difference I've learned. Real harm doesn't always come with receipts. Sometimes it just shows up as the way a voice shakes when it remembers. By week's end, we'd seen 12 women. By the end of the month, 47. All of them carried some piece of the empire that men like my father had built. Losses written in fine print and silence. You signed the papers? They'd been told. You should have read the details. As if consent given under illusion was ever real. Jessica showed up on a Monday. She stood in the entryway like she was trespassing. Wore a blazer 2 sizes too big, hair pulled back in a bun that had stopped trying to be polished. She didn't ask for anything, just said, "I'm here about the front desk job." I nodded once, led her to the desk, showed her the intake form, the call log system, the welcome script. She didn't complain, didn't ask about title, salary, upward mobility. She just listened. Later that afternoon, I found her standing in the archive room, looking at a whiteboard we'd hung to track patterns in financial coercion cases. Her voice was small. "They used my name for everything." "Yes," I said, "because you made it easy." She didn't argue, just nodded once, and kept working. She stayed. Weeks passed. She learned the phone system, the names of our regular visitors. She made coffee for women who came in shaking and left standing straighter. I watched her shoulders ease, little by little, not from pride, but from presence. There was no grand apology, no hug, no "we're sisters again," just work. Just small daily acts that didn't ask to be redeemed. One evening, as I was closing up, she hovered at my office door. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. I looked up from my laptop. "You mean the leak?" She nodded. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and opened the top drawer. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of intake forms and a single photograph of our mother, was the flash drive. The same one. Jet black. Unlabeled now, but I didn't need words to remember. I pulled it out, held it in my hand like a weight rediscovered. "This," I said, "is what they built everything on." Jessica stared at it like it might burn through the floor. "I could have destroyed it," I continued. "Could have erased the evidence and let karma run its course. But I didn't." "Why?" I looked at her. "Because she deserved the truth now." "Because if I destroyed it," I said, "they'd rewrite the story. Say it was overblown. Say I was emotional. That I misunderstood the documents." She flinched slightly. "I kept it," I finished. "So if anyone ever tries to forget, this reminds them." I took a Sharpie from the desk drawer and wrote 4 words across the top in capital letters. "Keep in case they forget." Then I slid it back in the drawer. Jessica didn't say anything, but she didn't leave either. Later, as I stood alone in the office, lights dimmed, the house silent but full, I realized I wasn't haunted anymore. This wasn't a story about revenge. Not really. It was a story about restoration. About choosing to live in a truth so solid that even fire couldn't unmake it. They gave the house to Jessica. I gave it purpose. They called me too busy. Now I was busy saving what they destroyed. And the flash drive? It still lives in that drawer. Not as a threat, but as a memory. A quiet weight that says, "This happened. This mattered. And I was here."